Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium's second in a series of webinars on the Supply Chain Management Readiness Assessment, discovering your performance relative to best in class, aligned to your strategic, tactical, and operational strength levels. A lot to learn about today. So in Tier 2 assessment, it takes the feedback of your cross-functional team of 5 to 8 stakeholders across your organization. Again, we appreciate you joining us today in the webinar, and we look forward to your feedback throughout and participation in the polling question that we have. Again, this is our second in our series of webinars. Our first webinar was the overall on the benchmarking, which is a free assessment that you can take at any time. We'll have that URL for you again at the end of this webinar. It also can be found on the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium website. Today, we're going to be looking at it from a slightly different perspective, and that perspective is more from a group dynamics of your company and assessing your company as a whole at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels. My name is Jim DeVries, President of Enhance International Group, and a partner of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. I will be the host of today's webinar. We also have with us Jenny and Connor from Uphaven Management, South Africa, who will be helping us coordinate the webinar. If you have any questions, please do enter them into the chat. We look forward to your feedback throughout. I'd like to introduce Greg. Greg will be sharing his vast experience. Greg is one of the original founders of Supply Chain Risk Management and is the founder of the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. Greg, a few words of introduction.
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Pleasure to be here with you today to talk about our passion. I am the founder of an organization called the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium. It's 30 companies, about 1,500 folks. We'll talk more about that in a minute. I've taught SCRM at Lehigh University for about 10 years. I teach ERM, Enterprise Risk Management, at Villanova University here in the States. Spent 8 years with IBM as a supply chain executive consultant and practice lead. Spent 30 years, like many of you, as a practitioner, as a supply chain exec for a couple Fortune 100s. I've taught SCM at 6 different universities here in the States and was past president of Apex, now ASCM, back in the late 90s. So just a quick thumbnail sketch of Greg. Back to you, Jim.
Greg, and it's back to you on the overview of the consortium.
Okay, sure, you bet. We said we'd talk a little bit about it. Quick thumbnail sketch of who we are on the right and what we do on the left. You can see we got 3 pillars: education, consulting, and software as a service. 30 companies, 1,500 supply chain risk pros around the globe. We operate in 23 countries. These companies that you see bring tools, techniques, methodologies, and software solutions in order to help us identify, assess, mitigate, and manage supply chain risks. That's all we do. On the left-hand side, what do we provide? We have 2 online education courses at the moment. One's a basic and one is dedicated to public healthcare. Perhaps you've gone through one of these courses, ends up with a certificate from the organization. We do virtual training like this. Jim and I do about 4 webinars a month since April of 2020. We used to do classroom training. Remember those days? They're coming back slowly. We just spent time at the SAPEX South African conference, which was face-to-face. That was great. Hopefully that'll come back. We provide certificates and certifications. We do awareness mitigation with companies. We bring best practices from our book. We coach companies. We help them build supply chain risk war rooms. We bring software visibility, and we're very excited about 2 online assessments. We boldened, we're going to talk about today, supply chain management readiness assessment. We're going to talk about that in detail today. And the other is prescriptive online supply chain risk and resilience 90-day action plan, which we've talked about if you've been on some webinars with us prior. So Jim, back to you, I guess.
Thanks, Craig. Just a little background about Enhanced International Group. We're an exchange of passionate experts to guide your transformation to providing self-generating and self-funding results. We have vetted over 50 consultants, consulting companies, and SaaS providers that provide you an enabling infrastructure to support your enterprise. EIG serves as that master integrator to provide you access to the best and brightest companies. We're like a Swiss Army knife. Our thought leadership expertise helps you and your company excel. Our goal is to meet and exceed your expectations with customized, predictable, sustainable, and repeatable 90-day action plans. Reviewing the bicycle slide and describing supply chain management, you see vision and brand there for today. Of course, it's supply chain management is our priority. And in part of our strategy is our intrinsic value and operating structure. And in execution, it drives visibility, operational risk management, and enterprise risk and resiliency. So that's how we look at things overall. And you could sum this up like Einstein did is, life is like a bicycle. So you got to keep on moving. So we want to gain and maintain competitive advantage for you using our solid team. For today's webinar, this is, again, the second in a series of webinars. Our first webinar is available. If you would like a copy of that, please send us an email, and we'll be more than glad to direct you to where that is. Again, this is focusing on strategic, tactical, and operational levels of strength. Our third webinar coming up at the end of July will focus on a benchmark comparison and process improvement prioritization for your company, our Tier 3 offering. And then our Tier 4 offering is about giving you a playbook for your company. And then Tier 5 is the capstone, aligning all the benefits, case studies, and building readiness for your supply chain management. So with that, again, these are our 4 tier offerings. We're going to be focusing on Tier 2, and we're going to focus on performance ranking relative to your best-in-class benchmark, the definition of the 4 best-in-class performance segments, the tenant groupings, those strengths, strategic, tactical, and operational, and then provide observations of performance gaps of high risk areas relative to best in class. And then coaching and consulting is part of that Tier 2 of 8 hours. Again, we'll be covering the other tiers in subsequent webinars. With that, Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. Jim profiled our 4 tiers of this new tool. We want to give you some more clarity on Tier 2, which focuses on strategic, tactical, and operational insights. So to get you grounded again, the Supply Chain Risk Management Consortium, we've taken 30 years of our experience, 12 years of risk management experience, and we developed this readiness assessment tool that provides 2 types of assessments. It assesses your supply chain management maturity, the processes, and it also profiles inherent risk. So as a recap, in Tier 1, last month's webinar, there are, over on the left, you can take a look, there are 13 tenets in our point of view that make up an end-to-end supply chain. Call them tenets, call them processes, analogous. The star chart on the left is a maturity model depicting how mature a company's supply chain processes are, where the lower the number, closer to the center, the more the mature the more mature the processes are. So as you go through the 92 questions in tier 1, you can see a company's response in this chart, which is the black lines. Remember, the farther away the responses are from the center, the less mature the supply chain process is as we see it. Secondarily, we've developed risk levels within the maturity model. And again, the farther from the center, the higher the inherent risk for that particular supply chain process. And now for tier 2, we've added additional insights. We've categorized the 13 tenets or processes into, as Jim mentioned, strategic, tactical, and operational. On the star chart on the left, the blue are strategic in our view, the red are tactical, and the green are operational. So what you see is the black line represents an organization's actual survey answers from tier 1, and then we profile their strategic, tactical, and operational strengths. And we'll profile actual client data a bit later. So from a deliverable point of view on the bottom right, it still acts as a benchmarking vehicle to evaluate future supply chain improvements. And we'll talk more about that in the session. It establishes an objective as is situation in terms of your strengths, the black line, provides direction for your future strength or your future to strengthen your supply chain processes. It provides a risk assessment level as well in terms of green, yellow, red, which we'll talk about later. And it provides observations of performance gaps and high-risk areas relative to best-in-class strategic, tactical, and operational. So with that, I think I'll turn it back over to Jim.
Yeah, Greg, fantastic overview. So with that, we'll ask everyone to complete the poll. It looks like we do have some already ranking here. It looks like CPG is, other than what's placed in the chat. Look over in the chat. I don't see anything in the chat right now, but with that response, I think we'll do the CPG one, Greg. I think that one's teed up right away as far as the case study that we will be covering in just a few minutes. Education, we have one education in the chat. So it would be education or healthcare or CPG. We can come back to this and see where we're at since they're almost tied right now. So
the horse race, yes.
That's the horse race. So we'll come back to that. So please do answer in the poll everywhere into the Greg Schlegel 910. So thank you again for participating. With that, we'll get to the agenda. So we're going to start with the compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. And then we're going to get into some background on why we developed it and how we developed this tool. And then we're going to get into this strategic, tactical, and operational definitions. We call them STO because everything needs an acronym. And then we're going to get into the case studies, and it looks like we're going to either do CPG or service education. And then we'll get into an exemplar case study on mature supply chain processes ensuring survivability. And then we'll provide a summary here of how to get started with this new tool. Again, we're going to start here with compelling reasons to promote supply chain readiness. Greg?
You bet. Thanks, Jim. We said we'd start you off with some compelling reasons to think about supply chain management readiness and assessment. So we thought we'd use this kind of a global computer supply chain profile. It's kind of an example of supply chain mapping, which we advocate, and essentially connecting the dots in terms of nodes within a supply chain. So you can see the chart. the chart is there's numbers, kind of a logical approach. And so we'll just start from raw material all the way to the customer. The threads on the left are aligned with the numbers on the right. So just think about it this way. Number one, raw material suppliers. You got them all over the place, several places. Then this supply chain goes to subcontractors, number two. Then it goes from subcontractors to number three, contract manufacturing folks. All right. Then it moves to number four, which is final assembly, possibly in several different places. You final assemble based on your where you're selling. Then five is packaging, where someone does distinctive packaging for this computer company, and then six is the consumer. So you can take a look at it. The global supply chain is still alive, no matter how many disruptions we all experience. And then I believe we have a kind of quote for you on the bottom of this slide that basically says the C-suite is a bundle of nerves this winter. A new survey shows that 72% of chief executive officers, not us in supply chain, but CEOs, are worried about losing their jobs in 2022 because of business disruptions. That comes from Bloomberg, Alex partners through one of the media organizations called Supply Chain Brain. So we just wanted to basically reiterate that, global supply chains are still operating. We have a lot of disruptions, and the C-suite definitely is like the media now. Everyone knows about supply chain, or thinks they know about supply chain, and we're wrestling with our disruptions every day. I think we have a few more compelling reasons to act. These are some of our top motivations that we see in terms of using supply chain management readiness assessment. Use supply chain manufacturing operations to create winning strategies. Of course, I'm probably preaching to the choir here. Holistic approach to transformation. Everyone's talking about digital transformation to capture end-to-end value. This is an approach that you can use to see your end-to-end processes in supply chain. Transforming manufacturing processes for better productivity. Sure, that's why we get paid to do what we do. Next is boost your operational health by identifying skills gaps and building capabilities. That's essentially what the 13 tenets provide. Fosters an image of your as-is. It does give you a profile of your as-is capabilities and maturity, and provides you a roadmap to improve those processes. And then 6, we have confirm your supply chain processes are at least at a minimum level of maturity. If you're not happy with that, there are methodologies to improve that. And then we really do this to essentially get organizations ready for the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. We'll talk more about that in a couple minutes. All right, next. I think this is the final slide in this section in terms of compelling reasons. We think one of the big compelling reasons to act and improve your supply chain processes is to build a resilient enterprise. And what does that mean? From our point of view in the book, we like this definition. Resilient enterprise has the capacity to overcome disruptions and continually transform itself to meet the changing needs and expectations of its customers, shareholders, and other stakeholders. I'll be honest with you, folks, that's a pretty tall order, all right? It's the why would you spend any time trying to understand what best practices are in supply chain risk and resiliency, all right? So essentially, to us, it's a compelling reason to act and to take a hard look at your supply chain processes. Jim?
Thanks, Greg. And we're on to the next section, Supply Chain Management Readiness Assessment. And in this section, we're going to kick it off with what is a supply chain management landscape. And again, this is just a rehash from previous webinars as we start at the design engineering up in the upper left-hand side. You have your sourcing or supplier management and purchasing, going into production and scheduling and the logistics to get it to your production area. And then in the production, you have order, material inventory management, order fulfillment, and of course, you're going to be monitoring your production and reporting on it. And then, of course, you'll have your decision support and the distribution out to your customers and your product service and sales and marketing team to get it out to the customer. So this is the high-level overview of when we talk about supply chain management. This is what the landscape we're covering. Greg?
You bet. We thought we'd give you a quick glimpse of the genesis of this assessment tool. You can take a look on the left again, 13 tenets. If you were with us in our first webinar when we talked about Tier 1, we have the 13 tenets. We now have color-coded them. The blue are strategic, the red are tactical in our view, and the army green are tactical. And then you can see the 3 levels of risk: the green circle, the orange circle, and the red circle. And then you can see the company's actual answers superimposed on the maturity chart. So again, remember, the farther away you are from the center of the graph, the less mature your processes are and the higher the risk. So the tool was born out of the first of a kind MBA class at Lehigh University 11 years ago. It was really great. It was so well received, we took the body of knowledge and this graph on the road. The tool's been operating in different levels of sophistication for about 10 years. If you've gone through a course of ours or a workshop, you probably have seen the Tier 1. We've utilized it in classrooms, workshops, webinars, and with client engagements as well. We have several different versions that are more sophisticated than others. We've now upgraded the tool again with an LMS, learning management system partner and platform called Educazi CLX. So with that, we'll move on, give you a little more insight into what the profile of the assessment tool looks like. There are a host of questions. Really what we do on every question, this one happens to be just agility, and it talks about disruptive innovation on the left. You can see there's normally 3 snippets. We ask you to decide which best depicts your as-is condition, not where you want to be, but where you are today associated with this supply chain process. Then we ask you to render an opinion within each snippet in terms of numerical identity, and then essentially we move on question by question. And then on the right-hand side of the slide, just to give you a sense of, this has probably been seen by over 500 MBA students in 2 of our US universities. We've trained over 3,000 operations and supply chain professionals over the years. We've actually utilized the tool for about over 200 financial risk professionals, bankers, insurance folks. And we've said we use it many times for several companies across multiple industries. So with that, we'll move on to a painful acknowledgement. We're being transparent here. After years of supply chain risk and resilient work and witnessing company outcomes from our other assessment tool, our pure risk and resilient tool, we've come to this conclusion. Not many companies are ready for the supply chain risk and resiliency journey. Many companies are still disjointed and have siloed supply chains. Not you, of course. Many companies don't maintain supply chain excellence in all of the 13 tenets. That's understandable. And therefore, we've kind of built out an upgraded version of our assessment tool to act as a primer to do two things: enhance a company's supply chain process maturity and get them better prepared to engage in a bona fide supply chain risk and resiliency journey. So we tried to be transparent with you here. This is some compelling reasons to act on perhaps your part and our part, and I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great, and we're ready for the next section on supply chain readiness and the strategic, tactical, operational definitions. Those strength finders, as we call them, align to our 13 tenets. So let's talk a little bit about the 13 tenets and how we divvy them up. So you see in the blue, the first three: leadership, balanced scorecard, and intentional redundancies. Those are our strategic tenets. Then 4 through 8 are our tactical tenets, starting with demand management, industry practices, information systems, integrated supply chain, and risk mitigation planning. And then at the operational level, in the green, we have supply purchasing area, S&OP, adaptive manufacturing, logistics, transport, and agility. So if you want to hear more about the definitions of these, please look at or review our previous webinar. We just wanted to show you how we're laying this out relative to those 13 tenets in manufacturing. Now, Greg's going to go into how they're laid out for services. Greg?
You bet. Jim mentioned that we have, we mentioned in the consortium intro that we manage 2 different assessment tools to support 2 different online education. Manufacturing, as Jim just profiled, and then services. And we wanted to just kind of tee it up and use the classical definition from ASCM's dictionary to talk a little bit about what does service industry look like. In its narrowest sense, according to ASCM, it's an organization that provides an intangible product. Maybe it's medical, legal, you name it. In its broadest sense, all organizations except farming, mining, and manufacturing. So if you're not manufacturing a product, but providing a service, moving logistics, that's what we're considering a service industry. And you can take a look at all the types of industries that ASCM considers a service industry. So with that, let's dig into the 13 tenets again. All right, these depict our 13 service tenets. All right, and they're pretty much the same, folks, as the manufacturing. Yes, certain questions have a little bit different nuance for services, but the big change is number 11. We highlight it, where we don't talk about adaptive manufacturing, and we don't go through questions of how do you manufacture, what methods. We talk about your supply chain processes end to end, how you build or how you move product or provide a service, because every manufacturing and service organization has a supply chain. So we really try to focus on number 11, which are totally different types of questions associated with the maturity of your service supply chain. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Great, Greg, thank you. So in tier 2, it's an organizational focus. So we're looking again at the strategic, tactical, and operational levels to help you make more dynamic decisions to drive that sustainability. And again, just to review what you get out of tier 2, again, you get that performance ranking relative to a best-in-class benchmark, a definition of 4 best-in-class performance segments where you were there, where you're performing relative to those best-in-class performance segments, aligned to strategic, tactical, and operational strengths for yourselves. And then we provide observations from what we've seen in your responses and those performance gaps in those high risk areas relative to best in class. And then we provide you that coaching and consulting to interpret those results so you can create your own 90-day action plan. And with that, we ask that this, supply chain management, as we covered in previous slides, is really an end-to-end. So you really need to look at it from not just a supply chain logistics perspective, but all the different stakeholders throughout, from IT, sales, operations. If you have a supply chain risk and resiliency director, that would be great. Procurement, operational excellence. If you have a technology, new product development, operations again, and finance and engineering. So you really want to get a cross-functional group aligned to probably a product line in your company. If you're a larger company, you're not wanting to do this across your entire enterprise, but focus on a specific area. And again, the way that we do this is we align those, as we covered in that earlier slide, the strategic and tactical and operational. We take all that feedback from you and your team to assess where you're at from each one of these 3 levels. And we roll up the scores. And now Greg will go through the definitions of strategic, tactical, and operational. Greg?
Get you grounded, again, a little bit more grounded. Methodologies and or definitions. So what we did is we went back, as good ASCM members that we are, we went back and took a look at the ASCM dictionary, and we kind of adapted from the dictionary to give you some additional insight on what we're thinking about in terms of STO horizons. So let me just go through. Strategic supply chain management horizons. These are normally a guide on how an enterprise will marshal resources and determine actions to support them, vision, mission, goals, and objectives. Probably things you're very familiar with. All right. The big kicker is this time horizon tends to be 1 to 5 years. So big picture stuff. Tactical supply chain horizons. Normally a set of functional plans, production plans, sales plans, marketing plans, synchronizing activities across functions, understandable, and again, I think we're preaching to the choir here, but the time horizons tend to be 1 to 15 months, and they can include sales and operations planning. And then finally, the operational supply chain horizons. These normally consist of very short range plans and schedules detailing specific actions. And you guys can take a look at it: production planning, detailed scheduling, engineering, quality, and all the good supply chain management things we know and love and learn in our certification. And these time horizons tend to be anywhere from 1 to 4 weeks. So we wanted to just give you a sense of clarity as we see these strategic, tactical, and operational areas within the Tier 2 chart. So with that, we'll move on and try to give you a little more clarity on Tier 2 segmentation and ranking. So let's start at the top right. And let me get rid of this so I can, let's see, yep. Let's start at the top right. We have categorized the 13 tenets or processes, again, into strategic, tactical, and operational. We shared our definitions with you in previous slides. And so why do we do this? Why are we doing this within the confines of the assessment tool? So we can drill down within the supply chain landscape and articulate where an organization is strong and where they might need additional improvement. All right. So as we always say with risk appetite discussions, if you've been with us for a while, there's no real right or wrong answer here. It's just new insights in terms of how the company feels about their strengths and weaknesses. How do they feel about the profile? And we'll talk more about the profile in a moment. At the bottom right, we now also take the strengths and weaknesses, or strengths, and we turn them into Venn diagrams. So the stronger the tenet, like strategic, tactical, and operational, the larger the Venn diagram. And then on the bottom left, we profile the STO calculations and we superimpose the actual as is assessment onto the same graph. So you can see it gets busy pretty quick. And we'll share some actual company data points with you a bit later. So we just wanted to get you grounded on what we're doing, why we're doing it. And as you can see, the blue are strategic, the red are tactical, and the army green are operational. We'll talk more about some additional insights in a moment. So with that, I'll turn it back to Jim.
Thanks, Greg. And we'll get into the case studies. So again, thank you for participating in the polling. We'll be referring to that in just a moment. But before we get into it, we just want to share with you some background. We've certainly had many of these surveys done in each of these industries segments, as we have identified: consumer packaged goods, electronics, industrials, and chemicals, and of course, healthcare, NGO. Since CPG seemed to came up pretty high, we'll just review some of the feedback we received from folks taking the survey. They said the supply chain readiness tool was very thorough and truly an end-to-end holistic assessment. The scope was much wider than he had initially anticipated. This was from a global CPG executives. And let's now look at what the NGO folks said. It says a comprehensive program, the persona are very aligned to our organization. Definitely a tool that I would recommend to other staff members in our supply chain management and service delivery pillar. So covering both the manufacturing, the service areas there, and some of the survey results. So just before we get into it too deep, we want to just go through the best-in-class ranking of exemplars, mainstream, apprentice, and as Greg explained earlier, the ring of fire. So in that, the exemplars, again, is that inner ring, and that's in that segment, it's demonstrated success of embedding supply chain management tools, techniques, methodologies, and solutions into how you operate every day. What is your day-to-day operations? And is continuously improved with supply chain processes, and they tend to be very high in maturity, and they're really focused on not just maintaining supply chains, but they're also talking about resiliency and sustainability as part of their daily lives. In the mainstream, between 3 and 6.5, these companies have bought into the supply chain management journey, and they've begun to make a lot of improvements. They have programs that are well established. They tend to be positioned at the end of the visibility stage and within the S&IOP predictability stage. And they have been doing SCM for several years and have reaped many bottom line benefits over the years. Then the apprentices are those companies that have attempted a few pilots. They're probably piloting different divisions, but do not have supply chain management practices across your entire enterprise. So they have those pockets of supply chain excellence, we like to say. And they've started to see the awareness and through educational workshops and online courses. So still in that education stage, and they tend to be early visibility in this stage. And then the ring of fire are folks that have not really done much and are in that early stage of realizing that they need to do something. So with that, we're going to switch over to the survey results to see where they come in. And let's see here. Here we go. So it looks like CPG is still out in front with industrials. So it looks like, Greg, we're going to do CPG. And I think that's the first one here. So Greg, you want to bring us through CPG, please?
Yep, hold on. Am I coming through? My laptop is not playing well with others today.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, good. All right. Yep, we have time for one. I believe we got to be tentative to or attentive to our body of knowledge here. So CPG, kind of busy, but we'll try to walk you through a real live example. This consumer packaged good. You can see their chart on the left. All right. You can see the actual assessment as is, black line. Then we superimpose the blue, the tactical, the red, and the army green. We calculate those, and then we come up with, in tier 2, some best-in-class segmentations and STO calculations. So as you can see, best-in-class segmentation, as we calculate it, this organization in our definition is in the mainstream. The best-in-class segmentation, as I believe Jim went through it, we call them leaders, mainstream, apprentices, and the ring of fire. So this organization, pretty good, 6.6. They're in the mainstream within this industry. All right. Then we go to the strategic, tactical, and operational focus, and we calculate each of the 3 elements. And the lower the number, the stronger the tenant. So essentially, in this particular company, they seem to be pretty strong in terms of tactics. All the tactical, red areas, the red tenants within the chart, they seem to be the strongest when it comes to those tactical aspects. The next strongest is strategic thoughts, leadership, balanced scorecard, intentional redundancies. And then the final element is operational. So again, the lower the number, the stronger the capabilities. And then you can see the Venn diagram in terms of the size of those 3 areas that we talked about. All right. And going forward down the bottom, tier 3 and tier 4, we are compiling data now to be able to profile these definitions, these calculations into where you reside within your industry. So that's coming soon. We're going to talk about that in our next webinar. So I just wanted to give you a sense of the CPG calculations of a company who has gone through the analysis. All right. So the persona recap is their mainstream. That's all good. They're very strong from a tactical point of view. And here's maybe some action items that we might present to that company. Maybe they want to focus more on supply chain risk and resiliency. They might be ready. You got to talk to them about that. We might say you might want to think about developing a tops-down approach to enterprise-wide supply chain and risk. Maybe you want to upgrade your supply chain management and risk talent skills. And then maybe you're ready to develop some new KRIs, key risk indicators, to reinforce good risk behavior. And the comment from the audience, the actual company, was the supply chain management readiness tool was very thorough, truly an end-to-end holistic assessment. That was great to hear. The scope was much wider than I initially anticipated. That's always good to hear as well. That came from a global CPG exec. So that gives you somewhat of a profile of the persona from an actual CPG company. All right.
Great, Greg. If there's any questions on more of that, please let us know. Our next section is an exemplar, XERA, on mature supply chain processes to ensure survivability. Greg?
You bet. We like Zara. We've worked with them in the past. We always like to talk about Zara as an exemplar in both supply chain management process maturity and good supply chain risk management. So again, we have their profile on the right, including the superimposed STO calculations. And just to give you a little thumbnail sketch, if you haven't been on our previous webinars, in 2015, Zara was operating very close to the exemplar status. You can see that. Remember, the closer you get to the center of the chart, the more mature your processes are and the less risk you have. And so that was depicted as kind of a yellow-orange circle at the moment. They were pretty good. You can see their actual, and then we calculated STO. One outlier in 2015, this is 7 years ago, was, as you can see on the bottom right at about 5 o'clock, information systems. Now you might say, well, how could you be an exemplar if you got lousy information systems? Well, they weren't lousy. They were just 1970 like systems. And what the organization did after the assessment is they agreed with us and they said, we just needed verification. And so they said, we have a vision of the next 5 years to go 4G, 5G, and get closer to the customer. And these tools are not going to support our vision. So they got reinforcement. And then basically what they did is they achieved additional best-in-class approaches in their sector because they took their unbelievable amount of free cash. Their cash conversion cycle, if you use that metric, is minus 45 days. What does that mean? That means they're a bank. That means they get paid by their customers almost 90 days before they have to pay for their raw material in any way, shape, or form. They took that free cash money and they built a multi-million-dollar supply chain risk management war room that manages and monitors their entire supply chain around the globe 24/7, 365. All right. And on that note, we actually calculated STO. So let's take a look. Their best-in-class segmentation, we actually call them an exemplar. You could use exemplar or leader analogously. They were 3.01. Their STO focus, very tight. We had to pick a number. Their lowest number was operational. Their second lowest was strategic, and their third lowest was tactical. A pretty tightly organized capability, very compelling. And we wanted to share that with you in terms of what does an exemplar in both supply chain management and some good risk management look like, especially relative to tier 2 calculations. All right. So we wanted to share that with you. And then we'll finish this section with a couple of threads from our point of view, what the value proposition is for the SCM Tier 2 readiness. Think of it this way. These things we're profiling to you, these measurements, they can be achieved as you enhance and improve your supply chain maturity. We've seen it over 35 years. 7% cost advantage, of course. Revenue increase, yes, you can drive revenue with good supply chain management. Cash flow improvement, anywhere from 40 to 65%. And we gave you the Zara profile. You can increase your throughput because if you can get more product or services through the supply chain quicker than your nearest competitor, that's an advantage. And the tool provides the building blocks, we think, to survive and thrive the risks in what we call the VUCA world. And the VUCA world is volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. That's our landscape right now, folks. No matter what you make, no matter what kind of service you're in, we're all in the VUCA world. So from an SCR&R business unit point of view, you can gain end-to-end visibility in your supply chain, especially in terms of your processes and how mature they are. You can execute actionable activities. They're vetted research by us with benchmarking and our body of knowledge. You can position your team, hopefully, to reduce supply chain risk and resiliency. Yearly costs. The statistics say you're going to have about 11 supply chain disruptions every 12 months. Those are going to cost you anywhere from $3 to $4 million. You're going to have to find that money out of your own pocket and treasury to essentially identify, assess, mitigate, and manage and survive. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jim.
Great, Greg. And we're going to get into our last section of how to get started into accessing the supply chain management readiness assessment. With that, Greg, a little bit overview on our free assessment.
Yeah, we wanted to just finish up here to kind of, again, get you grounded and reiterate what we have available to you. Tier 1, we talked about it last month. That's our readiness assessment. That's the classic graph on the left. You can see it. We talked about it with the tenets. You can see the as is with the black line. You can see the 3 levels of risk, green, yellow, and red. That's free. All right. It's out there. We have, you can visit it. You can see it and visit it on the website. We have a URL. I think we plopped it in here on the bottom. Give it a try. It's free. Contact us if you have any questions. Let us know how you felt about the process, if you can, who you collaborated with at all, if you had any surprises. If so, what were the surprises? These are kind of the questions we ask a lot of our learners through our online course, and it really gets a lot of good dialogue going. So give it a shot. We give you our website. My email address and Jim's are down the bottom right. Remember, it's free. It's one person. Get in there, give it a try, and call us if you need us. All right, Tier 2, just a little recap, little different. Basic tool on the left with STO superimposed. You can see that. We gave you a sense of what it is. Again, the tenets, the as is, and the STO calculations. From a deliverable point of view, it acts as a benchmark. You can take a look at it. Jim and I talked about best-in-class segmentation for you. It is an as-is supply chain positioning tool, provides direction inside the maturity model, are things that you can do. It's the what, not the how, but what you can do to improve. Provides risk assessment, gives you your strengths in terms of are you strong in strategic, tactical, and or operational? Provide operations performance gaps as we went through. And Tier 2 is not free, but you can get on the tool and essentially run through the analyses. And remember, it also includes 8 hours of consulting from Jim and I to lead, guide, direct, and coach you and provide clarity. Feel free to exercise the tool. Essentially, it's a step up from level 1. It's kind of accretive. You get level 1, then you move into level 2 to get additional insight. So again, remember, it includes 8 hours of consulting. Jim?
Great, Greg. And just some helpful hints on this. Again, pick an area in your company that you're familiar. You know, it's a crawl, walk, run kind of approach. You're not trying to do your end-to-end company. You're focused on a product line. Again, this is a group tool. This is not an individual tool. It's for an organization of your supply chain. You want to have a minimum of 5 to 8 stakeholders. You can certainly have up to 10 or 12, depending on how big your division is. That's perfectly fine. But we ask you have an assigned lead with this. And when you go into the software, we'll assign the lead access to the software. and that lead will sign up and register. You pay the $5K. We prefer credit card is the easiest for us to transact. Then we log in, you'll log in and enter your product line and division and set up the whole profiles, and then identify, of course, you're going to be identifying that lead coordinator for the program, and then set up all your team members that you would like to take the survey. Again, these surveys take, 25, 30 minutes. And in this case, we'd like you to take them independently. There's 92 questions. Shouldn't take more than 30 minutes to complete the survey. And then when all the registrants have completed the survey, we'll provide you the results and a summary with the assessment and our recommendations on how to move forward, and provide you that 8 hours of consultation to help you build your 90-day action plan. And again, this is tier 2. We will be getting into tier 3 in our next webinar. And that's really cool because that's where you can do benchmark comparisons. You can look at your strengths and weaknesses in your organization. It's much more prescriptive and telling you where you would go. And this is if you're a little bit headier and you're looking for more guidance. And again, our tier 4, which will be coming up in our second webinar after this, is going to get into providing you that supply chain readiness playbook. And again, more coaching. So again, thank you so much for joining us in the webinars. We covered our tier 2. Our next webinar will be on tier 3, as we just mentioned, on industry benchmarking. Very exciting with our 10 years of experience. And then tier 4 is about the playbook. And tier 5 is our capstone. So we hope to see you in these remaining webinars. If you would like to see the first webinar, please contact us and we'll direct you to the link. With that, we're all wrapped up at the top of the hour. And Greg, any closing comments?
Yep, you bet. This new assessment tool, again, has 4 tiers. Jim just went over them. Tier 1 is free. Remember that. That kind of gets you started, kind of get the dialogue going. Tier 2 provides additional insights, as we went through the seminar, on your organization's strengths, what we call your operational propensities, and will provide more insights in future webinars, and hope to see you there to talk about tier 3 and tier 4. Thanks again for attending.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.